a great time to be alive, do you know? Yeah, I mean, I talk about the Muslim world. I don't know how much they talked around here about what God seems to be doing, particularly amongst the young people. But he seems to be doing stuff. You know, even a couple of weeks ago, we were gathering. We're based down south, Southampton, though we go to Winchester Vineyard. And just hearing some of the kind of other ministers in the city saying, you know, every week we're having people turning up at the door. They've got no connections, any history with church, but they're having like a vision. They're having a dream where God says, go to church. There was one person who was having this discussion with God and said, God, if you want me to go to church, I want some random person to come up to me and just say this random phrase to me. And somebody did that. I still want to know what the random phrase was. It was something like, oh, it's raining. It's kind of like, okay. But if they kind of said like, you know, blue elephant or something like that, that'd be like even more amazing. But so God is doing something. And the stirring in my heart and the things I want to be sharing, I don't know if it's up. Maybe just put the first slide up, would be great. And Charlie in some ways alluded to it earlier. You know, he's talking about his life group and he says, you know, come hungry. And in some ways I could just say that and just sit down. We can just do ministry. But I want to just say a little bit more, you know, this phrase, let's come hungry. Wherever you are in your journey with Jesus, maybe you're here, this is your first time, maybe you've just been invited here, maybe you've been saying yes to Jesus for a number of years. Let's come hungry. And there's this kind of well-known verse in Psalm 63, and the writer says, you know, you, God, are my God, earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you in a dry and parched land and where there is no water. I'm not the greatest at English, but, you know, is it verbs, adjectives? I can't remember. But they're kind of doing terrible English. But there's kind of like that earnestness, that, you know, desire. There's kind of like a, you know, it's not passive. It's like, God, I really, really want you. I really desire you. And here we have the kind of one of the classics of English literature, the very hungry caterpillar. Yeah, this is bringing back memories. Either you read this or it was read to you. You know, and it's like not just a hungry caterpillar, but a very hungry caterpillar. And it's like, God, make us like that caterpillar. And if you haven't read the book, and most of you probably are familiar with it, but if not, it's actually translated into lots of different languages. He's everything. You know, that little caterpillar just eats, and then obviously it turns into a butterfly. And it's like, God, make us like that. Let's not be fussy about how you come and the way you do it. You know, all of us, every denomination, including the Vineyard, has its kind of favorite speakers. And, you know, we have certain ways of doing things, which I love. You know, just, you know, we do 4 or 5 songs in a row, whatever. But let us just be hungry for God, however he comes and in whatever shape he comes. And a bit like that caterpillar, it gets transformed. You know, you see it. When we are hungry after God and we go after God, ultimately, it becomes obvious to everybody. So God is attracted to hunger, actually. If I don't have my glasses, I can flick this slide. And, again, there's just a couple of, verses there. You know, the Lord has looked down from heaven and see if there's any who understand, who seek after God. And one of the verses I've been thinking a lot about, for the eyes of the Lord move to and forth throughout the earth, that he may strongly support those whose hearts is completely his. You know, whose hearts are set upon him, some translation says. He's like, you know, today he's going to go through, and maybe it's like if you come here and you feel like you're really hungry, you feel like you're really close to God. Maybe you've just been to a conference to kind of stir up excitement and passion. But maybe you're here and you just like literally just crawled through the door. It's like, I feel like this is the right thing to do. Maybe your heart doesn't feel like it's, you know, when you're singing the songs, you know, it's very easy just to sing them and maybe your heart not to be in that place. And God just saying, well done for being here. And I'm here just to strengthen that. And certainly later on there'll be an opportunity, particularly if you feel in that place where it just feels like you're, you know, the passion is just, it's just there. Just being here is a success in itself. And just pray and say, God, increase that. And there's a passage I didn't put up there in Jeremiah 29:13. In this translation, NIV says, if you look for me wholeheartedly, you will find me. I will be found by you. Some translations say, you will seek me and you will find me when you seek for me with all your heart. And you won't pick it up from the passage, but there's actually 2 Hebrew words for seek. This came to my attention literally a few months ago, even though I've known the verse for a long time. The first word for seek kind of just means, the way I describe it is like, there's kind of desire, but it's not a matter of life and death kind of desire. Maybe Andrew and I, we're just meeting up and say, hey, would you like a cup of tea or coffee? No, yeah, that'd be nice. It's not a matter of life and death. It's not like if we don't get this tea or coffee, we're not going to make it. Maybe another way of describing it is, I happen to be size 6 shoes. And take it from me, it's not easy to find adult size 6 shoes because officially it's a child size. And people go, great, you don't have to pay VAT. But however, if I want a smart pair of shoes, I don't want Velcro. And so occasionally I would just pop into shops like TK Maxx and other places, and I would just see how they got a size 6. Currently got these about 2 months ago, and I got a pair. I was like, oh, praise God, I got a pair ready for next year when I need another pair. And I kind of wander in. It's not like a matter of life and death. I can survive. So that's seeking. But the seeking that says you will find him is a different type of seeking, a different Hebrew word. And this one's more like a matter of life and death. This idea, a bit like you're in a desert, is like, I need to find water. It also has, in kind of the language of it is, in that seeking, to take hold of this, to take hold of God, you've got to let go of something. Sometimes the illustration I use, our youngest likes kind of what's called bouldering. If you're not familiar with that language, it's kind of like climbing, but indoors. And, imagine one of these kind of mountains, and it's like you're up there, you're halfway up there. It's like you can't really go down. Well, you could do, but let's not go there. And, but it's like, you got to let go of this thing. Better go. You can see up there, there's like this next foothold, handhold. And I've got to let go. That is the seeking that it's talking about there. This is the seeking, Jesus, the Bible is saying that you will take hold of them. And that's why he's inviting us kind of to be hungry after God. Let's just flick to, actually. Be hungry, boom. So to use a kind of different language, those who know me know I like to ask questions. So I'm going to just take a moment just to ponder these kind of questions in relation to even what I've just said. If I'm honest, I'm really hungry more after God. And I'm not saying that kind of like, oh, I'm doing quite well, or oh, I'm not doing so well. But just God always meets us where we're at. So it's just a kind of moment of just honesty before God. Where am I, God? In my kind of hunger or pursuit after you? What is the evidence of my hunger? Where's the evidence of my hungering after God? It's pretty obvious to see physically. You demolish a plate of food, or you don't. You just push the food around the plate. Where's my hunger? I'll touch a little bit more on this in a minute, but what's distracting me, drawing me away from hungering more? Those things that just pull at our heart. What does my next step of seeking God look like? One of my prayers has been, God, let my hunger for you increase. Let it not just be like the first kind of hunger. It's like, yeah, okay. But let it be that hunger. It's like, God, I have got to meet you. I've got to encounter you. Let that be the characteristic of us. One of my prayers I was coming here is like, let that be a characteristic of Derby Vineyard. These are people that hunger after God because he loves it. God desires to be wanted. I haven't got time to go through it, but if you look through the Bible, there's this constant theme of people not hungering after God. Hungering after other things. And where God is wanted, God turns up. You read that particularly in the stories of Jesus. The places where he's most wanted is where he did some of his greatest miracles. Because he's like, wow, I wanted it. You know what it's like when you go somewhere in some situation, you kind of pick up the vibes that, I mean, sometimes it's just because you turned up at the wrong time. There's just been like a massive argument in the family or whatever it is. You're kind of like, okay, turn around, let's go away. But sometimes you're kind of aware in situations where you're really wanted, you're really valued. You're kind of like, wow, they want me to be here. You feel a kind of freedom. You feel a release to be yourselves. And the same with God. And that involves kind of choices, and that involves intentionalities. If you just click on a slide, I'll read it off the slide because it's too small on my phone. I just want to tell you about a guy called Obed-Edom. Just to give you a really quick kind of context. There's this thing called the Ark of the Covenant. It kind of represented kind of God's presence in the Old Testament. I should know roughly the dimensions, but it was a reasonable size. And for many years, it had been neglected. Nobody had really taken an interest in it. Suddenly David says, hey, I think this is really important. It's kind of, this represents his presence. To use our language we're using today, we are hungry after his presence. We want to be aware of his presence. So they decided to move it, but they didn't look at the instructions box. And it caused them no end of problems, including, sadly, somebody dying. So they just decided to drop it at this guy called Obed-Edom's house. So yeah, this is David saying, he was not willing to take the ark of the Lord to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household. Now King David was told, the Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has because of the ark of God. So David went to bring up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David. We're rejoicing. So this guy Obed, and suddenly gets this kind of massive thing in his house. Now, I've lived in the Middle East kind of roughly about 11 years. I've been particularly to where it would be more kind of the traditional houses that might be kind of more similar to what would be in the context of this story. Take it from me, they're not large. Literally, might just be one room. And so this kind of thing would have dominated the kind of house. So they would have to begin to be aware of kind of living with this thing that's taken up pretty much the whole kind of space. As a parent who's had young children, it must have been a nightmare. Can I say, do not touch? And their lives would begin to revolve around this presence. And I suspect, and again, I'm kind of being a little bit liberal in my interpretation, that it would begin to affect their lives. Imagine just the presence of God permanently in your house. I suspect the conversations between the children, the siblings were a lot more kind of kind and uplifting and encouraging each other. I suspect the kind of relationship between Obed-Edom and his wife was the best it had been for years. I suspect they chuckled a lot more. They might not have been aware of it, but things just happen in life as they do, but they seem to just be more at peace in those situations. And again, I'm really reading into it in some ways, but I know what the presence of God does and has done. And then you could say, well, that's Obed-Edom's kind of 30 seconds of fame, whatever, and things move on. But if you read the book of Chronicles, the name of Obed-Edom begins to come up again and again, kind of 2-3 times at least. He's kind of like the doorkeeper, and then he ends up being a treasurer. And you kind of look at it and you think, like, how did this happen? On multiple levels. Partly because we know he's a Gittite, so he wasn't even an Israelite. He wasn't even from the holy tribe that should be around the presence of God. Somehow, I don't know how he managed to wangle that. And he's got all these different roles, but the only common denominator is this desire to be close to the presence of God. And obviously for him, it involved kind of choices. It involved kind of decisions. My challenge to myself and the challenge to us is, what does that mean for us? Because it's good to kind of go, yeah, I want to be hungry. Yeah, let's be the very hungry caterpillar. What does it look like in our lives? So just one more slide, and then we're going to take some time just to kind of respond. And this is what I do, as I often say in my home church. This is what I do. If it helps you, great. I mean, I hope it helps you as well, obviously. But if not, think through for yourself. What does it mean? So for me, I just began reevaluating how I use my time. What do I give my attention to? You see, everything that I listen to or that I watch is either helping me become more passionate and hungry after God or less. If nothing else, beginning to numb things. So again, this is what I'm doing. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong on this. A simple example was After having kind of like a love not relationship with Facebook for a number of years, I'm off Facebook. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I just knew for me, I could quite easily just go into Facebook, and boom, half an hour would go. Quite easily. You just look at the reels, they figure out what you like. You know, I like football, and so boom, 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 every match in the Premiership for the week is there. And I just went. And I was realizing that often kind of my first thought when I got up in the morning, or my last thought as I went to bed, was maybe something I'd just looked at. And it's like, that's not what I want. And so, again, I'm not saying that's what you got to do, but take some time. You see, everything. Nothing is generally neutral in life. It's either causing our hearts to hunger and desire God more, or it slowly begins just to numb it in the most subtle way. Secondly, just begin to cry out to God for just greater hunger, and it's nothing more complex than that. It's like I said before, he sees our quietest cry. It's not necessarily the loudest voice, but just like, God, I want more of you. God, I want more of you. Just start where you're at. And again, we might just have some space. You know, it's great. The worship we had earlier was creating some space. Like, you know, there's no one like you, Jesus. It's just beginning to articulate that. And the second point kind of links into the third one. It's kind of start where you are. You see, often you have to sing or declare a truth before you begin to live in the reality of that truth. And one of the things I had that helps me, maybe I'll send it on to Andrew later on if you want to have it on your WhatsApp. I'm not saying you have to, but I have what's called my Hungry Spotify list. And it's just songs I have that kind of just, it's like sometimes I'm there and sometimes often I'm not there. And I just begin to sing some of these songs. A lot of these songs are some of the really old ones I learned as a child. You know, as the deer pants forth the water. And it's like, God, let that become a reality. You know, knowing me. And sorry, knowing you, what's that old song? Knowing you, Jesus, thank you. I think I was singing this song. Yeah, no. Going there. Yeah, that's what everybody's going to remember now, the rest of this talk. But just like begin to sing those songs, and like they act as a springboard. I often say songs are just prayer set to music. And so whatever it is, it's like, God, I want more of you. And just take this intentionality and just strengthen. And so I got nothing more in some ways. Like I said, I could have just said it, right? Like Charlie said, you know, come hungry. Let us be people that are hungry. Hungry for God. However old you are, however long you've been following Jesus, there's way more. Way more. You know, I think it's Sainsbury's that have this little tagline, taste the difference. Taste the difference. And taste it again. And taste it again. Let us not ever become satisfied. There's way more out there. So let's just maybe respond. And if you're able, maybe if you can stand.